It was a quiet Saturday morning in Crestwood Hills, the kind of neighborhood where lawns were always trimmed, mailboxes were polished, and the whole board thought they were running a small government. But beneath the postcard perfect surface, resentment simmered, especially regarding one homeowner, Marcus Hill. Marcus was a proud father of two, a middle-aged black man who had worked his way up from nothing to provide his kids the kind of life he never had growing up. His home was modest but well kept, with a basketball hoop in the driveway for his son and flower pots his daughter helped water every evening. But for Karen Whitley, the whole president, Marcus was a problem she couldn't control. Karen thrived on intimidation. She'd been whole president for 6 years and had developed a reputation for enforcing rules that seemed to only apply to the people she didn't like. And Marcus, a man who spoke his mind and refused to bend under her pressure, quickly became her favorite target. It started small, passive aggressive violation notices for trash cans left out too long, even though others did the same. Then came threats about his kids playing basketball too late in the driveway. Finally, Karen escalated it further, spreading whispers at whole meetings that Marcus was not a good fit for their community. The meaning was clear, and her inner circle understood it well. But Marcus wasn't one to bow. He confronted her face to face once and told her plainly, "You can write all the letters you want. My kids will play in my driveway. My family will live in this house. You don't scare me." Karen didn't forget that, and she didn't forgive it. That's when she decided to take things to another level. She didn't just want Marcus to comply, she wanted him gone. And to do that, she needed a show of force. 2 weeks later, Marcus was fixing his daughter's bike on his driveway when a black SUV rolled slowly down the street. Out stepped two men dressed in tactical style uniforms, black cargo pants, tan vests, boots laced tight, and mirrored sunglasses. They had patches on their vests that read Community Compliance Unit. Marcus squinted, standing slowly. He knew immediately something was wrong. He had never heard of a community compliance unit, and honest officers didn't roll up like this, with unmarked cars and no badges. The men approached with authority in their stride. The taller one, a stocky man with a shaved head, barked, "Sir, you're violating multiple HOA orders. We're here to escort you off the property." Marcus tilted his head, resting one hand on the bike. His voice was calm, but firm. "Escort me off my own property? Who exactly are you supposed to be?" The second man, younger and bearded, crossed his arms and muttered, "We don't need to explain ourselves. You're coming with us." Neighbors began to peek out of windows. Curtains fluttered. Phones started recording. Something about the sight of two so-called enforcers confronting Marcus made people curious and uneasy. From down the sidewalk, Karen Whitley appeared, clipboard in hand, lips pressed into a thin smile. She strutted like she was leading the parade. "Marcus Hill," she announced loudly enough for the neighbors to hear, "your repeated violations and disrespect have forced us to act. You've left us no choice." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Karen, you've lost your mind if you think you can send hired thugs to my house." Her grin widened, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of nerves. "They're not thugs. They're compliance officers here under whole authority. And if you don't go with them peacefully, it will get worse for you. The stocky man stepped closer, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metallic clink echoed across the driveway, and the watching crowd gasped. But Marcus didn't flinch. He straightened his shoulders, his voice carrying across the street. Let me make something clear. This is my home. My children are inside, watching from the window. And no fake badge, no clipboard, and no scare tactics are going to change the fact that you have no legal authority here. The younger imposter shifted uneasily, glancing at the growing number of neighbors filming. He whispered to the stocky one, "Man, maybe this isn't a good idea." But Karen snapped, "Do it. Put him in cuffs. Show everyone we mean business." Marcus locked eyes with her. "No, Karen. What you're showing everyone is who you really are. And when this blows up, and it will, you'll regret ever stepping foot on my driveway." The imposters hesitated, caught between Karen's demands and Marcus's unshakable calm. The crowd murmured louder. Parents held their kids closer. Phones stayed raised. The tension was no longer just about Marcus. It was about a neighborhood realizing they were witnessing something much bigger. And then, the sound of a screen door creaking open broke the moment. Marcus's son, only 11 years old, stepped onto the porch, his small voice trembling but clear. "Dad, are they taking you away?" The impostors froze. The neighbors fell silent, and Marcus looked at his boy, his voice steady. "No, son, nobody's taking me anywhere." The boy's presence changed everything. What was once an host stunt had now turned into a scene where a child stood witness to intimidation and injustice, and the crowd's sympathy shifted entirely toward Marcus. Karen's face paled. She hadn't counted on the children being part of the moment. She hadn't counted on neighbors siding with Marcus. And most of all, she hadn't counted on Marcus standing so firmly in the face of her so-called authority. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned back to the imposters, his voice cold. "Go ahead. Try to put those cuffs on me in front of my son. See how fast this neighborhood turns against you. See how fast real law enforcement shows up here." The taller man's grip on the cuffs faltered. The younger one took a step back. Karen's confidence began to crumble, her clipboard shaking slightly in her hand. And Marcus, never raising his voice, never losing control, delivered the words that silenced them all. "This is your last chance. Walk away now, or you'll regret this for the rest of your lives." The air was heavy, almost electric, as Marcus stood tall in his driveway, his son still clutching the porch railing behind him. Neighbors lined the sidewalks now, phones raised high, whispering and gasping as the scene unfolded like a drama no one could have scripted. The taller imposter shifted his weight, the handcuffs dangling awkwardly from his hand. His authority, once force and loud, now felt thin. The younger man's eyes darted nervously between Marcus, the child on the porch, and the growing sea of cameras recording every second. But Karen Whitley wasn't ready to give up. Her face flushed red with frustration. She jabbed her finger at Marcus. "Don't let him intimidate you. He thinks he can ignore rules because of who he is. Make the arrest. Now." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his voice calm but cutting. "Arrest? On what grounds, Karen?" For letting my kids play basketball in the driveway? For not bowing down to your fake authority? You're not exposing me, you're exposing yourself. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "She's gone too far." Another neighbor, older and fed up, shook his head. "This isn't law enforcement. This is harassment." Karen turned to the crowd, desperate. "You all see how he disrespects the whole. He thinks he's above the rules. This is what happens when people don't fit the standards of this neighborhood." Those words were her mistake. They hung in the air like poison, dripping with the prejudice she thought she'd hidden behind rules and regulations. Phones zoomed in, recording her every word. Marcus let out a slow breath, his voice low but powerful. "You hear that, neighbors? This was never about basketball hoops or trash cans. This was about her deciding who belongs here and who doesn't. And today, she chose to show all of you just how far she'd go to prove it." The younger imposter shifted again, his voice uncertain. "Maybe we should go. This isn't what we signed up for." But Karen snapped back. "No, do it now. Show him we mean business." The taller man gritted his teeth, stepping toward Marcus with the cuffs raised. But Marcus didn't move. He planted his feet firmly, his eyes steady. "You put your hands on me, and you'll regret it." The crowd gasped as the taller man reached out. Marcus sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted in one fluid motion. The handcuffs clattered to the ground as Marcus forced the man to his knees. Gasps turned to cheers as neighbors realized they weren't watching a victim. They were watching a man who knew how to defend himself. Karen shrieked, "He's attacking them. Get him off." But the phones kept recording, capturing every angle, every second. And what those cameras showed was clear. Marcus wasn't attacking, he was protecting himself. The younger imposter froze, his hands raised. "I'm not doing this. I didn't sign up for this." He backed away, his voice shaking. "Karen, you didn't tell us it would go like this." Karen's composure cracked. Her voice turned shrill, desperate. "You coward. Do your job." But it was too late. The taller man groaned on his knees, cuffed by his own restraints, while the younger one stepped completely away, muttering apologies. Marcus bent down, picked up the cuffs, and held them high for the neighbors to see. His voice carried across the street. "These are toys. These men are imposters. And this woman," he pointed directly at Karen, "sent them here to intimidate me in front of my family." Phones flashed. Neighbors shouted. Some even applauded. The tide had turned completely. And just then, as if on cue, the distant wail of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights reflected off the windows of the houses as two patrol cars pulled onto the street. The imposters froze, their bravado draining with each flash of light. Karen's face went pale. The officers stepped out quickly, hands near their belts. One barked, "Everyone stay where you are." Marcus raised one hand calmly, keeping the other on the subdued imposter's shoulder. His voice was steady. "Officers, these men attempted to impersonate law enforcement on my property under the direction of this woman, President Karen Whitley. I've got dozens of witnesses and plenty of recordings." The officers glanced at each other, then at the crowd of neighbors holding phones high. One officer stepped forward, taking in the scene. the fake uniforms, the trembling imposters still cuffed, the whole president trembling with rage and fear. "Ma'am," the officer said firmly, "did you authorize these men to present themselves as law enforcement?" Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. She stuttered. "They, they're compliance officers. For the hoe. I was within my rights." The officer cut her off. "There's no such thing as whole compliance officers with authority to arrest. And impersonating law enforcement is a crime." He turned to the taller imposter, still kneeling. "You're under arrest." The younger man raised his hands higher. "I didn't touch anybody. She put me up to this. I swear." The crowd erupted in whispers. Phones captured every second as the officers cuffed the taller man and led him toward the squad car. Karen's protests grew louder, more frantic. "No, he's the problem. Marcus is the problem. He disrespects the rules. He doesn't belong here." But her words only made it worse. The officer shook his head. "Ma'am, what doesn't belong here is you sending men dressed like police to intimidate your neighbors. You'll need to come with us." The neighborhood seemed to exhale when Karen's wrists were placed in cuffs. Phones zoomed in, capturing the downfall of the once untouchable Ho president. Neighbors who had feared her for years now watched with satisfaction and relief. Marcus stood silently, his son still on the porch, his daughter now beside him. He put a reassuring hand on their shoulders. "See? I told you nobody was going to take me away." The squad cars pulled off slowly, the flashing lights fading into the distance. Karen and her imposters were gone. But the impact of what had just happened lingered in every whisper, every video clip, every glance exchanged between neighbors. For the first time, Crestwood Hills didn't feel like Karen's kingdom. It felt like a community waking up when the patrol cars disappeared down the street. The neighborhood was stunned. For years, Karen Whitley had ruled Crestwood Hills with an iron fist and a fake smile. She wrote the rules, bent them when it suited her, and broke them when it served her interests. People grumbled behind closed doors, but rarely stood up. That ended today. Neighbors slowly lowered their phones, still buzzing with the adrenaline of what they'd just witnessed. Some whispered in disbelief, others shook their heads, and a few clapped Marcus on the back as they passed his driveway. "You stood your ground, man. About time somebody put her in her place. She's been bullying this neighborhood for years." Marcus nodded politely, but his attention was fixed on his children. His son gripped the porch railing tightly, while his daughter leaned against his leg, wide-eyed from everything she had seen. He crouched down, pulling them both close. "You see?" he whispered gently. "Bullies don't win forever. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes standing strong, but the truth always comes out." His daughter whispered, "Dad, was she trying to take you away?" Marcus sighed. She thought she could. But just because someone pretends to have power doesn't mean they do. Remember this. Real authority protects people, it doesn't try to scare them. The children nodded, clinging tighter to their father. By the evening, word of what had happened had spread through the entire subdivision. Clips from neighbors' phones began circulating online. The video of Karen ordering her imposters to arrest Marcus and then being led away herself spread like wildfire. The whole board held an emergency meeting that very night, and for the first time, Karen wasn't there to lead it. Instead, she was sitting in a county holding cell, facing charges of harassment, conspiracy, and solicitation of criminal impersonation. At the meeting, neighbors spoke freely, many for the first time in years. An elderly couple recalled how Karen had fined them hundreds of dollars for having a flower pot the wrong shade of blue. A young mother admitted that Karen had threatened her over letting her toddler's toys sit in the yard. Story after story came out, painting a picture of a woman who thrived on intimidation. And through it all, Marcus sat quietly at the back, his children by his side. He didn't need to say much. His driveway had already told the story. By the next morning, the board announced Karen's resignation or her removal. A new interim president was chosen, one who promised transparency and fairness. And perhaps most importantly, the board acknowledged what so many had whispered for years. The hoe had been used as a weapon, not a community tool. But for Marcus, the victory wasn't just about Karen. It was about his children. Crestwood Hills held a community gathering in the local park the following weekend. Families brought folding chairs, kids played tag in the grass, and the atmosphere felt free of tension for the first time. Marcus was asked to speak, and though he was initially reluctant, the neighbors insisted. He stood on a small platform, his son and daughter sitting proudly in the front row. His voice carried with quiet strength. Last week, my family was targeted because I didn't bow down to intimidation. My kids saw men in fake uniforms try to drag me away from my own home, and they saw all of you, our neighbors, watching. Some of you recorded, some of you spoke up, and because of that, the truth couldn't be hidden. He paused, scanning the crowd. Parents nodded. Children leaned in. Authority is not about fear. It's not about clipboards or threats or uniforms. Real authority is about service, protection, and accountability. If someone uses power to make others afraid, they are not a leader, they are a bully. And bullies, no matter how loud, will always fall when people stand together. Applause erupted. Some stood and clapped. Others wiped away tears. The message was clear. Marcus had not just defended his home, but also reminded an entire neighborhood what leadership meant. Afterward, his son tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, were you scared?" Marcus smiled softly. "Of course I was. But courage isn't about not being scared. It's about standing firm even when you are. And I needed you and your sister to see that." His daughter grinned. "We saw. You were amazing." The rest of the day was filled with laughter and conversation. The shadow Karen had cast over Crestwood Hills was gone, replaced with something the neighborhood hadn't felt in years: unity. As the sun dipped low, casting warm light across the park, Marcus sat back in his chair, watching his kids chase each other across the grass. His heart swelled with relief and pride. They had seen injustice. They had seen intimidation. But more importantly, they had seen it defeated. And somewhere in a cold county cell, Karen Whitley sat with nothing but regret. Regret for believing fear could ever outshine truth, underestimating the very man she tried to break, and regret for not realizing that her downfall would be her own. The neighborhood had learned a lesson. The children had learned a lesson, and so had Karen. Because when bullies use fake power to tear others down, they always forget one thing. Real strength comes from standing together. And when a community finally sees through the lies, regret always hits hard.